All right, everybody. So today we're going to start talking more about what's happening here in the Pacific. So yesterday we had talked about how the Battle of Midway was the huge turning point of the war in the Pacific because Japan's Navy is just decimated at this point after America took out their aircraft carriers at the Battle of Midway, and then the rest of their ships were pretty easy work once your aircraft carriers are gone and can't defend them. So, picking up from there, this is Chester Nimitz. This is the guy, the head admiral in the United States that orchestrated the Battle of Coral Sea and then the Battle of Midway. This is Douglas MacArthur. This is the guy who had to be taken from the Philippines, pretty much against his will and saved by the Americans. And this is him. So after the Battle of Midway, we're going to go back to the Philippines, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and we're able to get the Philippines back. This is a picture of him marching into the Philippines. We're methodically working our way through Europe at this time, the Pacific at this time. Everything is going really good for us. Everything is going fantastic. There's no issues. And then there becomes a really, really big issue. It's the kamikazes. So we think since there's no aircraft carriers that Japan has anymore, there's really no possible way that they can stop us. We are wrong. They do this thing called kamikazes. Now, in today's society, we hear about terrorism, we hear about suicide bombers quite often. In the 1940s, that wasn't a thing. So when they start doing it, it blows our minds. So what a kamikaze is, I think maybe if you've seen enough movies or whatever, it's a guy in an airplane that slams his airplane into things he wants to blow up. That you are correct in that, but there's some clarifications I need to explain to you. Number one, all the kamikazes were volunteers. Nobody was forced to do this. And at the end of the war, they have more volunteers than they could have ever used. They have more volunteers than they have planes. So there's no shortage of this. These are people volunteering to sacrifice their life for their country. Again, nationalism and extreme patriotism and this belief that you are better than everybody else and people are willing to die for their country, very common in all countries. And I think the kamikazes is a great example of that. So these are not fighter jets. These are bombers. So these pilots would take off from a fully functioning airport from Japan, and they'd fly out into the Pacific, and they're trying to find a aircraft carrier. All right. But if they can't get an aircraft carrier, they'll take out something. All right. So these bombers, what they're going to do is they're bombers. They're not the little jets. They are fully functioning big time bombers. But even if you try to drop bombs from a bomber over a ship, you're probably not going to hit it. Secondly, they're so far away, they only had enough fuel to get out there anyway. So even if they went out there and could drop bombs on these ships from a bomber, which wouldn't be possible for a variety of reasons in the 1940s, they wouldn't be able to make it back anyway. So what they did is when they would take off, their bomb doors are welded shut. And a lot of times their landing system is disabled as well. So there's no way to be able to land even if you change your mind once you're in the air. And then you fly really, really high in the air, and then you find your target and you come straight down on it. So even if you get shot down, you should still hit your target. This is what Japan starts doing against the United States Navy, and it blows our minds. The big question ends up being, how do you defeat somebody who is choosing to die? How will they ever surrender if they are choosing on their own to die? And so the kamikazes really make us question how in the world is this war going to end. So it's very effective. It freaks out a bunch of American soldiers. So they do end up taking out an aircraft carrier using kamikazes. This is a picture of the aircraft carrier that they hit. You see the huge hole that's been blown into it right here on the side. This is another picture from the same view. So there were people who died. They were typically the ones that died on impact as this aircraft carrier slowly sinks over the next couple hours. All these men on the deck, they all survive because they're with the rest of the Navy. They can come out. There's plenty of lifeboats and stuff. There's no Lusitania or Titanic situation here where there's a lack of lifeboats. So all the men that can make it up to this point, these all guys survived. There were a lot that died inside the ship at the impact. It'd be really cool if I had a video. So it's absolutely baffling. Baffling. All right. So this is very, very, very important. As far as like a history class goes, this is like the most important thing in World War II, because this is going to affect really the future of relations between us and Russia. That's right, Russia. So here's what happens, all right? This is pivotal that you understand this thing right here called the Yalta Conference, all right? Because it's going to change history as much, not quite as much as the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I did, but the Yalta Conference is really, really, really important. So, the war in Europe against Hitler at this time, because they're happening simultaneously, is going pretty good. It's obvious that the war is going to end in Europe and the Allies are going to be successful. Well, everybody else is prematurely patting themselves on the back because we're still a couple months away, but Hitler can't really fight back. Hitler's still alive, but it ain't going well for him. So, as everybody's patting themselves on the back prematurely, America needs to have a meeting with really what they call themselves the Big Three: England and Russia and America. So they're going to have this meeting because the question is, what do we do with Europe after World War II? So Hitler's taken over everything. Who gets that land? Like, do we just give it back to the countries? Like, Russia has gone through and liberated a bunch of these countries. Russia wants to keep a lot of these countries. There's some questions. So there's this meeting called among these three nations, which is called the Big Three. And I got a picture here I can show you while I do this. All right. So, super famous picture right here. This is FDR. He's struggling. He's already got polio again. He's about a month and a half dying. Dude's smoking a cigarette. He's getting ready to die anyway. Let him have a stogie, all right? Or let him have a cigarette. So you got Winston Churchill with a cigar. He is the leader of England, all right? And then you got Joseph Stalin. Notice all three of them are sitting down at this meeting. Why is that? It's because FDR is he's crippled. He's in a wheelchair. So out of respect for him, they all sit down in chairs. This is the first recorded picture that I'm aware of that Stalin is pictured sitting down, and it's out of respect for FDR. All right. So at this meeting, all right, Stalin is going to ask, all right, I think Stalin may be one of the ones that called this. He's going to say, hey, FYI, all the stuff that Hitler took over, like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and all that we, Russia, have lost tons of troops to go liberate. When this war is over, we want to own that. All right. Now, they're communists. England and America adamantly against communism. All right. Absolutely do not want it to spread. So Winston Churchill, not surprisingly, says, absolutely not, Stalin. You don't get to own those countries. Absolutely not. And then they're like, ain't that right, America? You got my back? And FDR kind of sits here and he's like, hold on a second there, Winston. And Winston Churchill's like, are you serious? You're going to take his side? And we're like, Winston, there's more than you know about this situation. So FDR is actually going to side some here with Stalin. Really, Winston's pretty salty about it. But hey, we came and bailed out Winston Churchill and England, so they'll have to, get over it. So we're like, all right, Stalin, I'll tell you what. Here's the deal. And this deal is what's really important with the Yalta Conference. There's a handful of negotiations that take place here. So we're in February, all right, of 1945. The war in Europe is going to officially end in May of 1945. All right, so there's a handful of months away from it. It's obvious it's going to win. But the war in the Pacific is going really bad. They got kamikaze pilots. We don't think that we can win. Knowing that people are willing to die before they give up in Japan, we already start to realize if we have to invade the country of Japan, all right, and this is what's terrifying, and this is what makes us forced to go talk with Russia. If we invade Japan, there is a chance we can lose 1 million American soldiers trying to defeat Japan. More soldiers than has ever been lost in the history of the United States combined could be lost if we invade Japan. We really don't want to do that. And if we have to, we need some help because we're basically out here on our own. I mean, Australia, they're helping us out, but they just don't have the numbers, all right? So Russia, all right, which is, look at a globe, they're above China, so that they're actually part of them is pretty close to Japan. We're like, hey, Russia, tell you what, we're open to discussions with you owning countries like Czechoslovakia and Poland after World War II here in Europe if, and this is a big if you will help us out in Japan, all right? Because we're going to need an ally, a big mamma jamma that's going to help us defeat Japan. So here's how negotiations go. They go back and forth, but here's what the agreement is, all right? So, Yalta Conference, very important because there's some give and take on both sides. Russia will help us invade Japan, but they basically need to wait until November of 1945 to do it. We don't want Russia's help, but we have to have it, all right? So, we're like, okay, because we 100% realize, all the stuff that Japan owns, guess who's going to want that? It's Russia. And communism is just going to spread like wildfire, which we do not want to happen. But we also need to stop Japan. So we're like, oh, this is awful. So the deal is, all right, Stalin, you are allowed to have these countries like Czechoslovakia, Poland, and all that under your control, and they'll be called satellite nations after World War II in Europe. But, and here's the stipulation, before they're officially your countries, they have to be allowed to vote, all right, and have a vote in their country that says they are cool with that. They have to like publicly say they're good with it. You can't just be like, you're mine now. You have to give them the option, all right? If they want to be part of you, we're going to let you have it without a question. Now, Winston Churchill's just grumbling over here like, I don't want that at all. But we have to make a deal with them. So Stalin's like, FDR, I promise you, I will let them have a vote to see whether or not they want to be part of me or not. I'm sure they will, but I'll let them have a vote. And we're like, okay, and there's this one more thing we need from you. And Stalin's like what? And we're like, so after the war, you know what was worse than World War I? World War II. You know what's going to be worse than World War II? World War III. Let's not have a World War III. And Stalin's like, I agree. So we're like, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to create this organization, all right? The League of Nations was our attempt in World War I. Completely didn't work, all right, because everybody didn't join it. We're going to create a group after World War II, and it's going to be called the United Nations. The United Nations is where all the countries get together and talk about their beef before weird stuff happens, all right? It's also going to be a military organization where if one country acts up, the rest of the world can declare war on that one country. However, Russia, this is FDR talking, the United Nations will only work if every country joins it. I know you like to do your own thing, and you like to be a loner and do communist stuff with your communist little part of the world. I need you to join it. I need you to join the United Nations. If you will join the United Nations, I'm going to let you take over like Czechoslovakia, Poland, if you let them have elections, all right? And you help us out with Japan. And Stalin's like, agreed. Because as you know, I'm going to get half of all of Japan's stuff too when I help you out. And we're like, what? No habla inglés? Like as we like walk away. Because we know that's what Russia's thinking. But we don't even want to talk about that because we absolutely don't want that to happen. But hey, we're good where we are. So the Yalta Conference is the agreement that basically 6 months after the war in Europe is going to end, Russia will retool and come help us with a massive land invasion of Japan. All right, because at this time, the atomic bomb isn't a thing. All right, J. Robert Oppenheimer is still sitting over in his dungeon trying to make this. All right, so the Yalta Conference is how we get Russia, who we don't like, but we have to get them involved. All right. So, back to the Pacific. I should have had a map here, but I don't. I think I can explain it to you because it's pretty simple. So, Japan is an island. There's like 10,000 tiny little islands all around Japan that Japan has soldiers stationed on that are willing to fight to the death for it. If we had to take over every single one of those islands, it would take forever. So we know that if Japan falls, all those islands will stop fighting. All right, so we know that. So what we're going to do is, as we move closer to Japan, we're going to take this concept called island hopping, which means that you're just going to hop over the islands that you don't need and only take the islands that you do need. We need to be able to bomb Japan. Bomb them. Not shoot them with little fighter jets. We need to bomb them. In order to be able to bomb Japan, we need a fully functioning airport near Japan. Because the bombers can't fly. They're like transfer trucks. They got to refuel. All right. So we got to have a fully functioning airport that's very near Japan so we can take off full-on bombers from like a 1.5 mile runway so we can fly over and bomb Japan. So Japan owns everything in the region. So we have to take something from Japan that has an airport. We realize that the island near Japan that has a fully functioning airport is this one, Okinawa. It's a pretty solid island. A lot of people live there. Fully functioning airport. We want Okinawa. If we can have Okinawa, we can fly over Japan with our bombers and bomb the bejesus out of them. All right. However, Japan knows that we're going to want Okinawa, so they've stationed a ton of troops at Okinawa. We can't just roll in with boats and unload them at Okinawa, coming all the way from America, and unload them at Okinawa and take it over. That's not possible. We actually are going to need an island earlier than Okinawa. Just a small island near Okinawa, just to where we can set up shop. All right. So the island that we pick, and we try to pick the most random island that we can find. And we find this island called Iwo Jima. The whole reason for Iwo Jima, this is going to be the first main island we're going to try to take near Japan, is just to be able to set up shop to attack Okinawa, which is what we really need because it has an airport. So we could have picked any random island. So we find Okinawa, pretty solid, good size island, a couple square miles, I believe. And we roll around it with our boats, looking to see if anybody's on it. Looks completely deserted, but we're like, yeah, we don't trust that at all. So we open fire with our Navy, like completely surround Iwo Jima for a month and open fire on it, absolutely annihilating any vegetation, anything that's moving or twitching on Okinawa. It's just completely like decimated after we destroy it. And we're like, yeah, ain't nothing on this now. So we unload all our troops to go start setting up camp to basically start prepping for our invasion of Okinawa. What we don't realize, well, Japan is not stupid. They knew this is what we were going to do. There are 20,000 Japanese soldiers stationed on Iwo Jima. They're not going to just stand out in the middle of the woods as they're getting bombed until everything gets blown to bits. They make bunkers underground. We don't touch any of them on this bombardment. When we come ashore on Iwo Jima, they don't even come out and attack us. Because if we send our troops out first, make sure it's secure, looks secure, troops get back on the ship, we send out like medical personnel, office personnel, like, oh, it's safe, you guys going over there. Once we start unloading like the second wave of people onto Iwo Jima, the Japanese soldiers that have been hiding come out, and there's just vicious fighting on Iwo Jima. And a lot of Americans die. We have to bring our Marines back. A lot of fighting takes place on Iwo Jima, and we're eventually able to secure Iwo Jima. Now, the craziest thing here, there were 20,700 Japanese on that island. Only 200 lived. Because they will fight to the death, and even the commanders, they will literally commit suicide. It's called seppuku, with a sword through them, and then execute themselves before they will surrender to Americans. A lot of the 200 soldiers that survived were like knocked unconscious and didn't have a chance to either fight to the death or commit suicide. Again, this is where those numbers of what it's going to cost to invade mainland Japan, just astronomical, just keep rising. All right. But after we take over Iwo Jima, we're at least prepared for the amount of fighting that's going to take place on Okinawa. We do go from Iwo Jima. We invade Okinawa. We lose 7,600 Americans. 110,000 Japanese died. And a lot of the Japanese were the civilians that lived on Okinawa. Because it's a fully functioning airport. It was a civilian area. There were a lot of soldiers there, but there were also tons of civilians. Really, by Okinawa, America just bombs anything that moves that's not American. There is really no attempt to avoid civilian casualties at this point. And looking back on it, it's pretty messed up. But at the time, Okinawa, we had to have that airport. We do eventually take Okinawa. We now have a fully functioning airport next to Japan. And as soon as we have Okinawa, we can start flying nonstop over Japan, bombing the bejesus out of them, trying to soften them up. We would love for them to surrender. All right. The war in Europe is over. We now have to wait till November of 1945. All right. 6 months now for Japan to help us invade. So we're like, all right, we got to wait till November for Japan or for Russia to help us out with Japan. If there is any possible way that we could end this war before November, guess who we wouldn't have to share anything with? Russia. But short of, some new miracle weapon coming out, how's that possibly going to happen? Well, spoiler alert, that's exactly what's getting ready to happen, is we're going to come up with a brand new weapon called the atomic bomb that is going to fundamentally change the outcome of this war.
The U.S. was island hopping steadily toward Japan, capturing Guadalcanal, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. By October, the U.S. Navy reached the Philippines. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf, they fought the Japanese fleet in one of the greatest naval operations in history. The U.S. prevailed. General Macarthur had kept his promise to return. President Truman set November 1945 as the date for a land invasion of Japan. But to stage the attack, the U.S. would first need to capture the heavily fortified islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Advanced air and naval bombardments were meant to soften enemy defenses for an amphibious invasion. But once on shore, U.S. Marines were forced to fight a terrifying war of attrition. Snipers fired on the advancing soldiers from hidden entrenchments. The Marines fought back using flamethrowers and hand grenades to destroy the underground enemy. When the last shots were fired, over 18,000 Marines had died fighting on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. 90,000 Japanese soldiers were dead. Over 100,000 Okinawans perished as well. Many of those who survived were homeless and shell-shocked.
All right. So this is a picture. I like this picture of Okinawa. And what I like about it is you look at the faces here close. These are not adults. Like you see these World War II movies and everybody's like 30 years old. These are 17, 18-year-old kids that are pretty close to your age, are the ones that actually fought here in World War II. All right. So now we're going to talk about what's going to end the war in the Pacific with Japan. So we've talked about the Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference is where Russia has gotten involved. Russia is going to help us invade in November of 1945. We really don't want their help, but we have to have it. We realize if we use their help, we have to give them all types of stuff we don't want to do, but whatever, we don't have another option, all right? Because we're afraid it could lose 1 million American lives if we invade Japan. While all this is happening, J. Robert Oppenheimer, he's been building the atomic bomb using the brain power of Albert Einstein with his theory of relativity equals mc squared. And he puts it together and he's like, oh my gosh, I think I got it. J. Robert Oppenheimer believes he has created the atomic bomb. So he's like, oh my gosh. So he runs to the White House, goes in the office, and Truman's there. He's like, sir, I think we got it. And Truman looks at him and is like, and who are you? And he's like, dude, J. Robert Oppenheimer, I've been building the atomic bomb. And Truman's like, who are you? The Manhattan Project that was building the atomic bomb is so secret that Harry Truman didn't even know about it till he became the president. All right. J. Robert Oppenheimer's like, made a big bomb, go boom. And he's like, have you tested it yet? And he's like, I haven't. And he's like, well, go test it. See what happens. J. Robert Oppenheimer goes and tests this bomb, and it is absolutely crazy how powerful it is. 600,000 people had worked on the atomic bomb in America, and nobody had any idea what it was because he was just having people work on individual parts, and he's the one that put it all together. So I got a picture here. This is not the first test, but I like this picture to show you the power of the atomic bomb. So the atomic bomb, the one they're going to test here is about the size of a suitcase. It's on an island in the middle of the Pacific. This is not the first test. I think this actual test actually takes place after World War II. But if you notice, the size of a suitcase, it's the smallest version of the bomb that they can make that will detonate and work. This right here, if you look at your screen, hopefully it's not cut off. These little black lines right here, those are battleships. All right, and they're all empty here. They're testing it out to see the power of it. So this is from an atomic bomb that's like the size of a suitcase. All right, the bomb that they make two of them. Because make them slightly different to see if one works better than the other. They both work equally horrifically. That the bombs that they're going to use, all right, would barely fit into my classroom. To show you how big that is, they have to get a specially designed plane to carry it. All right, and they named the plane the Enola Gay. They basically it's the biggest bomber they have at the time, and they put like nitrous thrusters on it because once they drop it and it detonates in Japan, that plane has to be out of sight far enough to not get blown out of the sky. So there has to be a specially designed plane that's going to carry it. As we're getting ready to talk about it, I don't want to forget to say this. The guy on the Enola Gay who pulls the lever the first time the atomic bomb is used, he lived the rest of his life after World War II in Davie County, and he just passed away in the early 2000s. So it is a very localized thing with that. So we have the atomic bomb. Now, I need to explain because this is one of the biggest controversies in world history. Should America have used the bomb or shouldn't they have? Because we are. And we're not going to use it once. We're going to use it twice. We're going to drop this atomic bomb. We are not going to drop it on military targets. We're going to drop it smack dab in the middle of a city. It'd be like dropping it in the middle of New York City or in the middle of Los Angeles. We target civilians with the atomic bomb. Now, keep in mind, as horrible as that sounds, here's what we've been doing. Once we had Okinawa and we could fly over and bomb them, we've been dropping firebombs on them, on civilian cities. We've killed over 1 million civilians by setting them on fire. Setting them on fire. All right? This is what we'd already been doing before we even get the atomic bomb. We look back on this and we are horrified as a human civilization, not just Americans. Americans like had to do it, but if you really think about it, we have been so desensitized to civilian deaths in World War II at this point. It started with Hitler attacking civilians in Russia pretty heavily. It started with the Battle of Britain with Hitler bombing civilians. Then when he goes into Russia, he's just slaughtering civilians. He would rather kill civilians when he invades Russia than allow them to be prisoners, and then he has to feed them. It starts with that. Then the Allies, when they start bombing Hitler because look how bad Hitler is doing it to us. Then at the end of the battle in Europe, we discover the Holocaust. And so our mindset of the bad guys are so bad, the ends justify the means. By the time we get to Japan, where our soldiers have been getting tortured to death and this other stuff, the value of civilian life has really diminished into a sad point where we are setting their civilians on fire in Japan, trying to get Japan to surrender. And Japan won't, because people set you on fire, they don't want to quit. So we are doing everything that we can. So once the atomic bomb comes out, everybody's like, oh my gosh, I bet that was such a morally questionable thing. You know, Truman probably stayed up late all night. It's like, oh my gosh, should I use this? I don't know. Here's what happens. J. Robert Oppenheimer's like, we got it and it works. Should we use it? Truman's like, yes, use it now. How many we got? Use them all. Like, while it was there wasn't a debate on it. Because at the time, the value of human life had been so desensitized of civilians that it wasn't even a question, given the time. We look back on it now. Should we have whole types of moral debates today on should we have? Absolutely. At the time, based on the circumstances, they didn't even debate it. They just did it. Should they have is again, that's the debate. I'm not saying that it was morally right at the time, the complete opposite. I'm just saying morally, there'd been so much moral decay that had taken place in societies around the world during World War II. We didn't think twice about it. It's not until after we used the atomic bomb we're like, hey, you think maybe we shouldn't have done that? Here's why Truman wants to use it. It's going to be available at the beginning of August. If we use the atomic bomb, we can end the war before November. If we can avoid the war and we can end it before November, guess who we can keep out? Russia. That is a huge part of this. We want to keep Russia out of this war so we don't have to share all this stuff that Japan has and then allow communism to spread. We know there's soldiers with the kamikazes are willing to die. You can kill all of them and they won't stop. So this is why, just straight horror, we're going to find civilians. We find civilian cities that hadn't been bombed yet to show them, to like just intimidate them into surrender. So this is a picture of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And I believe this video here is the fire bombings that we had been doing before the atomic bomb gets created.
B-29 bombers were destroying Japanese cities and killing thousands of civilians. In a single firebomb attack on Tokyo, over 100,000 innocent Japanese were incinerated.
So we've already crossed that road of killing civilians when the atomic bomb comes out. This is a picture of the bombers flying over and dropping these firebombs. It's absolutely insane. All right. So when we get the atomic bomb, there's no hesitance. There's no meetings. They're just like, use it. All right. On August 5th, 1945, all right, a B-29, a specially designed one called the Enola Gay, is going to drop the first atomic bomb. They're going to pick the civilian city of Hiroshima. Now, there's another reason why they don't just drop it on military bases. So military bases were kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we wanted to terrify the people in Japan to force their government to surrender, because we don't think their government will surrender. We need to terrify the people to force their government to surrender. That's our logic, as messed up as it is. We've already killed 1 million of them. More people than have ever died in the history of the United States military we have killed by setting them on fire in Japan before this. All right. So we pick Hiroshima, a city that has pretty much not been bombed at all, because we want to show what this new weapon that America has can do. All right. So on August 5th, 1945, we fly over and we drop the very first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. It's nicknamed Little Boy. All right. We drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, absolutely decimates the city. To explain some of the logic behind this, or to try to explain how big it is, the mushroom cloud basically hits space. All right, I've got a photograph of it from behind the plane, and it just looks like a mushroom cloud, because to have a picture that encompasses the mushroom cloud, nothing else is big enough to be seen for reference in the picture. It just looks like a mushroom cloud. The best way I've heard it explained, not only is it the loudest sound and the brightest light ever seen on Earth, it was detonated in Japan, which is an island. The people in China saw it. Like, it's absolutely incomprehensible, this weapon that America has. We drop one in Hiroshima. We deserted the city. We told them in advance that big bomb's coming, you better leave, all right? We've been setting them on fire and not warning them. So when we drop little pamphlets on them and say, big bomb's coming, you better leave, they really believe us. And Hiroshima is relatively deserted as far as being, where else are they going to go? As far as it can be, we drop this bomb on Hiroshima and kill 100,000 people in an evacuated city. All right. We drop this atomic bomb and we tell Japan unconditional surrender. Now it's interesting, because Japan It's going to be a month before Japan surrenders. We end up dropping a second atomic bomb here on them on August 8th, 1945, because they don't want to surrender. All right. It's not that they don't want to surrender. I should not say this. We say unconditional surrender. You surrender, we decide what the punishments are. There's no negotiation here. Japan really wants to keep their emperor, Hirohito. Not Hideki Tojo, they know that dude's going to be out. They want Emperor Hirohito to stay, all right, as their emperor. And we're like, no, we didn't negotiate with Hitler, all right? We can't start negotiating with them now. Had we negotiated and we said, yes, you can keep this or that, it would have ended earlier. But we couldn't back down once we say unconditional surrender, which is we had said before we dropped the first bomb. So they want to negotiate with us after the first bomb, and we're like, nah. And we're like, surrender unconditionally or we'll drop another. And they're like, well, fine, do it. So we do. On August 8th, 1945, we dropped the second bomb called Fat Man. We drop it on Nagasaki. Similar situation, wipes out 100,000 people. And we're like, unconditional surrender now or we're going to drop another. And Japan's like, do it. And we're like, we will. And they're like, do it. And we're like, we will. You know why we don't drop another one? Because we only had two. We only made two. So it takes, there's this thing called enriched uranium that you have to do in order to use an atomic bomb. The enriching process takes over a year to do. All right. We only made enough for two bombs because we didn't know if it was going to work. So now what we can do, we start enriching it. We can make 1,000 bombs, but it's going to be about a year before our 1,000 bombs are ready. So we keep threatening them and they're like, we'll do it. There's another whole reason, and this one is even more, it's all questionable at the time, why we use the atomic bomb. We're trying to intimidate Japan. Intimidate Russia. We know us and Russia are going to have beef after this war. We dropped this bomb to show Russia what America's got. Man, we drop this atomic bomb, Russia's eyes get this big. And it's not like, oh, we're so scared. Russia's eyes get this big and says, I won't. All right? Like, I want one of those too. So Japan, I keep saying Japan. Russia, all right, when we drop these atomic bombs, it doesn't really intimidate them. It excites them, all right? They're like, if America has it, we got to have it too because, so we drop it to try to intimidate Russia, but it just really motivates them to get it themselves, all right? Not only that, with them wanting to get their own atomic bomb here in Japan, their own atomic bomb after we use it on Japan, Russia, you know what Russia does immediately after our second atomic bomb? They declare war on Japan. They're like, hey, America, we got your back. And we're like, no, you don't. No, you do not. You do not have our backs. You said November. And we're like, nah, we're going to help you out now. We're going to declare war. So Russia just, the second part of August, ends up declaring war on Japan. They're nowhere close to being able to invade. But you know why they declared war? Because they're trying to claim after the war, guess who gets to own a bunch of Japan's stuff since they helped America out. All right. And as soon as we get the atomic bomb and we're using it, we're like, no, thanks, but no thanks, Russia. And Russia's like, no, we're buddies. Let me help you out. So ends up being this weird tension with us and Russia, with Japan here with the atomic bomb. We keep threatening to use the atomic bomb, and Japan just gets super stubborn about it. All right. And they won't. Here's how the war in Japan ends. Emperor Hirohito. He was 16 years old when all this thing started. He is in his late 20s now because Japan's been going on longer than America got involved. So he's the one who overrides everything. So everybody in Japan is willing to fight to the death. Emperor Hirohito, they have never heard his voice before in Japan. He goes on their national radio over every single channel and says, we're done. Like, America has this new immoral weapon. We are not going to fight. We are going to give a complete and total unconditional surrender so that we don't keep dying. All right. As soon as he says that, Japan is just, they just do things differently. The moment their emperor says they surrender, everybody in Japan's like, okay, we're done fighting. You win, America. What would you like us to do? Would you like us to punish ourselves? We will punish ourselves. What would you like? Like, instantaneously. Like, it's shocking. Once the emperor says they're done, Japan just flips a switch. It's like, okay, we're the losers. Well, we've lost now. Y'all just come do whatever you need to. And there's like no questions asked. And it's very abnormal how uniform Japan's culture transitions with things like that. So on September 2nd, 1945, it is called VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day, and the World War II is officially over. I got so now I have some video clips here of the atomic bomb in Japan. Now I'm gonna move myself down here so you can see it. Don't ask me how some of these videos got out. I don't know. I don't know.
The U.S. marched across the sea toward Japan. Daily raids by American B-29 bombers were destroying Japanese cities and killing thousands of civilians. In a single firebomb attack on Tokyo, over 100,000...
We already saw this. Where's my... I gotta have another video here. This here is the... this is the picture from behind the Enola Gay in which it shows the destruction of the atomic bomb going off. I'm not going to go without showing you a video. If I don't have it here, I'm going to figure something else out. So this is a photograph of Hiroshima. This was like New York City. They drop one bomb, and this is what happens. See this building right here? Like, man, that building withstood it. That window right there is the second floor window. This bridge is what they're aiming for, and it drifted off course and detonated about a quarter mile above the ground, which is to make a bigger explosion right above this building. It blew this building. Since everything else blew out, this building got pushed down. It blew this building a floor and a half into the ground. All right. This is absolutely insane. Just whoosh. The entire metropolis just gone in a single bomb. All right, hold on one second, and I will find you this video. All right, I might actually have been right on that. Just need to go a little longer. All right, here we go.
For Japan, defeat was inevitable, but the island nation refused to surrender. The mounting loss of life worried President Truman. Military advisors cautioned that 250,000 American lives could be lost invading Japan. Shortly after becoming president, Harry Truman learned of the Manhattan Project, a code name for the best-kept secret of World War II. A nuclear weapon powerful enough to destroy an entire city. Testing in the New Mexico desert proved the atomic bomb not only worked, it was even more powerful than scientists predicted. President Truman was faced with a sobering decision. Use the horrible weapon to end the war, or risk the lives of countless Allied troops in a land assault on Japan. With the urging of top aides and military advisors, Truman decided to drop the bomb on Japan. The Allies issued a final appeal to Japan's military leaders to unconditionally surrender. This was known as the Potsdam Ultimatum. Still, Japan's military leaders remained defiant. At 2:45 a.m. on August 6, 1945, a B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, headed out over the Pacific toward the Japanese military center of Hiroshima. At 8 o'clock, the atomic bomb dropped clear of the plane. "43 seconds later, the city of Hiroshima was annihilated. That afternoon, President Truman again called for Japan to surrender. When Japan failed to respond, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, leveling half of the city and killing more than 60,000. By the end of the year, the death toll had reached more than 200,000 from injuries and radiation poisoning caused by the two bombs. Finally, amid scenes of unimaginable death and destruction, Japan's Emperor Hirohito capitulated.
I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
Alrighty. So, go away. I don't know why it's doing that. Don't be weird. Alright. So that's as far as we're going to get today. See you guys tomorrow.